I realize it's the end of the National Retail Federation's big meeting, summit that's taking place, the annual event, but it's happening at a time when the stock market is definitely questioning what retail strategy is out there. We did see pretty decent numbers overall for the holiday season, and yet you have all these concerns about retailers that are not going to be able to remake themselves and that are dealing with a really shifting genre right now. How do you respond to that? What happens?
Well, we are in the middle of a really big week. We've got 40,000 people here and lots of CEOs, lots of senior executives, many of whom we've had conversations with. And Andrew and I were just talking about a conversation yesterday I had with Ed Stack and Hubert Joly, Chip Berg, today Brian Cornell, Marvin Ellison, Alec Gourlay. And I think, I guess I would put it this way, what we saw last week seemed to be a mixed bag in terms of the way the street reacted to some of the performance. But in talking to these CEOs and virtually everybody I've had a conversation with, there's universal agreement that the consumer remains in a very strong place and that the industry is positioned to continue to do well.
Hey, Matt, I would push back on that. I would say it didn't seem to me like there was a mixed reaction to what happened. I thought the numbers that came in were pretty decent overall, and yet I think the street looked at that and started punishing even people that turned in decent numbers by saying, we don't know what's going to happen next.
For sure, I think our view would be there was an overreaction. I mean, you saw at least one company increase guidance, one company goes to the high end of their previous guidance, somebody reiterates, somebody lowers. So in that regard, the
street punished everybody.
The street punished everybody, right?
Even people who had decent numbers, I think, got punished because investors are now looking at this and saying, this is an inflection point. Do you think it's an inflection point in the industry?
That's not what we're hearing. And I don't think that the CEOs and the executives that lead these companies feel that, because they feel the fundamentals are strong and there's a real, certainly there's been more of a bifurcation between winners and losers. And I think you see much more of a premium on the stores and the brands and the companies that are able to execute the digital strategies really well, use the store as a real hub. Brian and Target have talked about 75% of their fulfillment came from their stores, and that's a real competitive advantage.
The problem is the street figured out that even if you are catering to the digital side of things, that's great, but the margins get compressed there. So how does the street deal with this, or how does your industry deal with the idea that customers want it, how they want it, when they want it, where they want it, and that's a pretty expensive proposition.
Well, and that was a conversation that Andrew had a while ago. We were talking about this, and you said, but remember the promise of e-commerce was supposed to be the margins, right? And so I think that's something that as everyone gets better at this and they bring new technologies to bear, they understand how to use this all more efficiently. We've got AI and robotics and all the other things that are being put to work, many of which are being demonstrated at the show this week. I think the efficiencies are going to increase. And so there's a period of transition that we're going through. And on this continuum, some companies are further along than others. And I think that's why you saw the separation of some winners and losers. I mean, just to use Target, since it was out there, their digital sales increased almost 50%. They comp the comp, they're up almost 6%. And they get pulled down, and you're like, well, what do you have to do?
What I mean. It doesn't make sense. Even when you're putting up decent numbers, you're getting punished pretty strictly. What about the tariffs and the overhang? What do you hear from retailers right now? Are they prepared for this if talks don't go well and the tariffs actually get increased?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a question. When we did some visits last fall, we're in Hong Kong and China and talking to suppliers and some of the sourcing outlets for some of our members. And I think one thing we know is there's an acceleration that predates the tariff conversation about diversifying the supply chain. So that's happening across the board for other reasons related to labor costs and input costs, that sort of thing. I think the general recognition is if it happens, number one, we all have to deal with it. So if you're efficient, you're going to have an opportunity to separate yourself from the pack, and it could be a competitive opportunity. We'd like to avoid any self-inflicted wounds, like a government shutdown, like a fight over the debt ceiling, the kinds of things that fit in the category of tariffs. So the economy's in a good place, consumers are in a good place. Let's not make it any worse.